Tonight, we dive into the ocean's most mysterious drifters, brainless, boneless jellyfish that rule the seas. From tiny polyps to giant lion's mane jellies, and even the immortal jellyfish that can reset its age, their lives are stranger than science fiction. Before we drift any deeper, like the video if you enjoy this journey, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And now, dim the lights as we explore tonight's underwater world together. There are creatures in our oceans that seem to exist outside the normal rules of biology. They have no brain, no heart, no bones, no blood. They cannot see in any way we would recognize as sight, cannot hear, cannot think. And yet they hunt, they kill, they reproduce. They survive in every ocean on Earth, from tropical shallows to the crushing depths of the abyss. They have been doing this for over 500 million years, making them older than trees, older than dinosaurs, older than most life as we know it. We call them jellyfish, though they are neither jelly nor fish. They are something else entirely, something ancient and alien. When you watch one pulse through the water, translucent and ethereal, it barely seems real. It looks like a ghost, like a living dream, like something that wandered out of another dimension where the laws of nature work differently. The body is more than 95% water. Hold one in your hand, and it collapses into almost nothing, a smear of slime and a few threads of tissue. But put it back in the ocean, and it comes alive again, elegant and deadly, a drifting predator perfectly designed for a life spent floating through liquid space. The name we've given them is almost absurdly inadequate, jellyfish, as if we couldn't be bothered to come up with something that captures what they actually are. Scientists prefer the term Medusa, after the Greek monster with snakes for hair, whose gaze could turn men to stone. It's a better name. There's something mythological about these creatures, something that doesn't quite fit into our understanding of what an animal should be. They challenge our assumptions about what life requires. Can you be alive without a brain? Can you hunt without eyes? Can you exist without any centralized control system? Just a loose network of nerves spread throughout a body that's barely there. The answer, impossibly, is yes. There are over 2,000 species of jellyfish, and they come in forms so varied that it seems impossible they could all belong to the same category of life. Some are smaller than your fingernail. Others grow longer than a blue whale. Some glow in the dark with their own cold light. Others are transparent, nearly invisible, impossible to see even when they're right in front of you. Some drift passively wherever the current takes them. Others actively swim, pulsing their bells in rhythmic contractions that push them through the water with surprising grace. Some have tentacles just a few millimeters long. Others trail stinging arms that stretch for more than 30 meters, creating deadly curtains of venom that hang in the water like invisible nets. And recently, they've been winning. While humans worry about the health of the oceans, about collapsing fish stocks and dying coral reefs, jellyfish populations are exploding. They form massive blooms that can cover thousands of square kilometers, darkening the water with millions upon millions of pulsing bodies. They clog fishing nets and overwhelm power plants. They devour fish eggs and larvae faster than the fish can reproduce. In some parts of the world, the ocean is being transformed from an ecosystem dominated by fish into an ecosystem dominated by jellyfish. We may be witnessing a fundamental shift in the nature of the sea itself, a return to something more ancient, something that looks more like the oceans of the Precambrian era, before complex life, as we know it, evolved. This is the story of those ancient survivors. This is the story of life without a brain, of immortality, of creatures that can literally reverse their own aging and start over again. This is the story of the drifters, the jellies, the medusae. This is the story of the most successful animals you've never really noticed. To understand jellyfish, you first have to forget almost everything you know about how animal bodies work. Forget bilateral symmetry, where the left side mirrors the right. Forget the idea of a head and a tail, a front and a back. Forget centralized organs. Forget a brain that coordinates everything. Forget blood that carries oxygen to tissues. None of that applies here. A jellyfish has radial symmetry. If you look down at one from above, it's organized like a wheel, with body parts radiating out from a central axis. There's no front or back, because there doesn't need to be one. The animal doesn't move in any particular direction with purpose. It drifts, it pulses, sometimes it swims, but even then, it's mostly just moving up or down in the water column, not heading toward any specific destination. It goes wherever the ocean takes it. The body plan is startlingly simple. There's the bell, which is the dome-shaped part that pulsates. The outer layer is called the epidermis, and the inner layer lining the gut cavity is the gastrodermis. Between these two layers is a thick, jelly-like substance called mesoglia, and this is what gives the jellyfish its form. The mesoglia is mostly water, but it contains some structural proteins that hold the shape together. It's not muscle, not fat, not connective tissue, as we would understand it. It's just gel, but it works. The gel provides structure without weight, allowing the jellyfish to maintain its shape while remaining neutrally buoyant in the water. Hanging down from the bell are the tentacles, and this is where things get dangerous. The tentacles are covered in specialized cells called cnidocytes, and inside each cnidocyte is a nematocyst, which is essentially a tiny harpoon coiled up under pressure. When something brushes against the tentacle, the nematocyst fires in less than a millisecond, one of the fastest cellular processes in nature. The harpoon shoots out, penetrates whatever touched it, and injects venom. This happens automatically. The jellyfish doesn't decide to sting you. The cells themselves are triggered by touch and chemical signals. Each nematocyst can only fire once, but a single tentacle might have hundreds of thousands of them, creating a forest of microscopic weapons. The venom varies depending on the species. In most jellyfish, it's enough to paralyze small prey like zooplankton or fish larvae. The toxins interfere with nerve and muscle function, causing paralysis almost instantly. For a human, most jellyfish stings are painful but not dangerous. The pain comes from the venom's effect on our nerves, and it can be intense, like being burned or hit with a whip made of nettles. But some species are genuinely deadly. The box jellyfish of Australia and Southeast Asia injects venom so potent that it can kill a human in minutes. The pain is reportedly so extreme that victims have gone into shock and drowned before the venom itself could finish the job. The venom attacks the heart, the nervous system, and the skin cells simultaneously, causing cardiovascular collapse. But let's return to the body itself, because what's most remarkable isn't how a jellyfish hunts, but how it exists at all without the things we consider essential for life. There is no brain. Instead, there's a nerve net, a loose network of neurons spread throughout the body. This nerve net can coordinate basic functions like swimming. When the bell contracts, it pushes water out, propelling the jellyfish forward or upward. This contraction is controlled by pacemaker cells in the nerve net that fire rhythmically, causing waves of contraction to spread through the bell. It's remarkably similar to how a human heart beats, except there's no central control. The rhythm emerges from the network itself. Because there's no brain, there's no learning in any conventional sense. A jellyfish cannot remember anything. It cannot plan. It cannot problem solve. It simply responds to immediate stimuli, and yet it navigates the ocean, finds food, reproduces, and avoids threats well enough to have survived for hundreds of millions of years. This suggests that intelligence, as we understand it, is optional. You can be a successful animal without it. There's no respiratory system because the jellyfish doesn't need one. Oxygen diffuses directly through the thin tissues from the surrounding water. There's no circulatory system because nutrients are absorbed directly from the gut cavity, which branches throughout the body in canals. The jellyfish eats by extending its tentacles and capturing prey, then moving the prey to the mouth, which is located on the underside of the bell in the center. The mouth leads to the gut cavity, where digestion occurs. Waste exits through the same opening. Mouth and anus are the same thing. This simplicity is not a weakness. It's a strength. With fewer parts to maintain, fewer systems that can fail, the jellyfish is robust in ways that more complex animals are not. It can survive in low oxygen environments where fish would suffocate. It can tolerate huge variations in salinity and temperature. It can be cut into pieces, and in some species, each piece will regenerate into a new individual. The body is almost absurdly resilient because there's almost nothing to it. Take away 95% of the mass, and you're left with the functional essence of the animal. Everything else is water. If the adult jellyfish seems strange, the life cycle is even stranger. These creatures don't just grow from baby to adult like most animals. They transform, they metamorphose, they pass through stages that look nothing like each other, stages that seem to belong to completely different organisms. It begins with sex, though even that is unusual. Most jellyfish release sperm and eggs directly into the water, where fertilization happens externally. In some species, the female holds onto the eggs, and the male's sperm finds them there. The fertilized egg develops into a small, swimming larva called a planula. The planula looks like a tiny, oblong blob covered in hair-like cilia that beat in coordinated waves, propelling it through the water. This is where the first transformation occurs. The planula, after drifting for anywhere from a few hours to a few days, settles onto a hard surface. It might be a rock, a pier, a shipwreck, a piece of coral, even a crab shell. Once attached, it undergoes a dramatic metamorphosis. It transforms into a polyp. The polyp looks nothing like a jellyfish. It looks more like a tiny sea anemone. It's a tubular structure anchored to the substrate by one end, with a mouth surrounded by tentacles on the other end. The polyp is sessile, meaning it doesn't move. It stays attached to its spot and feeds on passing plankton, stinging them with nematocysts and pulling them into its mouth. The polyp can live like this for months or even years, growing and occasionally reproducing asexually by budding off copies of itself. A single polyp can create a small colony, a cluster of genetically identical individuals all growing together on the same rock. Then, when conditions are right, the polyp undergoes another transformation. This process is called strobilation. The polyp begins to develop horizontal grooves along its length, dividing itself into a stack of disc-shaped segments. It looks like a stack of tiny plates, each one a developing jellyfish. One by one, these discs pinch off and swim away. Each disc is called an ephira, and it's a baby jellyfish, though it doesn't look much like an adult yet. The ephira has a star-shaped body with 8 arms and a small bell. It swims by pulsing that bell, and as it feeds and grows, it gradually develops into the full Medusa form, the adult jellyfish we recognize. This complex life cycle means that jellyfish exist in 2 very different forms, the polyp and the Medusa, and the polyp stage can persist for a very long time. This has profound implications. A single polyp colony can produce hundreds or even thousands of jellyfish over multiple years. The polyps are small, hidden, hard to study, and incredibly resilient. They can survive conditions that would kill the medusa. When environmental conditions favor jellyfish blooms, it's often because countless hidden polyps, colonies that have been quietly growing for years, suddenly all undergo strobilation at once, releasing a massive generation of ephira into the water simultaneously. Understanding this life cycle is crucial to understanding why jellyfish populations can explode so suddenly. You might see relatively few jellyfish in an area for years, not realizing that beneath the docks and on the rocks and hidden in the crevices, there's a vast population of polyps biding their time. Then something changes. The water warms, or a fish population crashes, and suddenly there's an abundance of food, or some other trigger occurs. The polyps respond by producing medusae, and seemingly overnight, the water is full of jellyfish. And then there's the species that breaks even these strange rules, the species that achieves something that should be impossible. There is a species of jellyfish so small and unremarkable that for years scientists barely paid attention to it. It's called Turritopsis dohrnii, and it measures just 4.5 millimeters across. You could fit several on your thumbnail. It lives in temperate and tropical waters around the world, drifting in the plankton, eating tiny organisms, reproducing. In almost every way, it seems ordinary. But Turritopsis dohrnii does something no other animal can do. When it faces stress, injury, starvation, or old age, it can reverse its aging process entirely. The adult medusa sinks to the seafloor, retracts its tentacles, and reabsorbs its bell. Its cells undergo a process called transdifferentiation, where they transform from one type of specialized cell into another. Nerve cells become muscle cells. Muscle cells become sperm or eggs. The entire adult body essentially melts down and reorganizes itself back into a polyp. This is not rejuvenation. This is not healing. This is a complete reset. The jellyfish reverts to an earlier stage of its life cycle, a stage it had already passed through. And from that polyp stage, it can grow and produce medusae again, medusae that are genetically identical to the one that regressed. It can do this indefinitely. In theory, a Turritopsis dohrnii need never die of old age. It can cycle between polyp and medusa, medusa and polyp, over and over, potentially forever. Scientists discovered this ability by accident. In the early 1990s, a marine biology student in Italy was studying jellyfish life cycles. He had some adult Turritopsis in a tank, and he neglected them for a while, not feeding them properly. When he returned, expecting to find dead jellyfish, he found polyps instead. At first, he thought he had made an error, that these polyps had been in the tank all along, and he hadn't noticed. But as he experimented further, he realized what was happening. The adults were transforming backwards. The implications are staggering. Aging, as we understand it, is supposed to be a one-way street. Cells divide, telomeres shorten, damage accumulates, and eventually the organism dies. But Turritopsis has found a way around this. When its cells are stressed or damaged, it simply transforms them into something else. It's as if a butterfly could transform back into a caterpillar and then become a butterfly again and again, cycling endlessly. This doesn't make the jellyfish truly immortal in a practical sense. They can still be eaten by predators, killed by disease, destroyed by physical damage. In fact, most Turritopsis probably die young, consumed by fish or other predators before they ever have a chance to age. But they have biological immortality. Given the right conditions, with no predators and no disease, a single Turritopsis could theoretically live forever. Researchers are fascinated by the mechanism behind this transformation. The key seems to be in how the jellyfish controls cell differentiation. In most animals, once a cell becomes specialized, muscle or nerve or skin, it stays that way for life. The genes that would allow it to become something else are locked down, inaccessible. But Teratopsis can unlock those genes again. It can take a fully differentiated cell and make it pluripotent, capable of becoming any type of cell again. This is similar to what stem cells do, but stem cells are undifferentiated to begin with. Teratopsis is taking mature, specialized cells and forcing them back to a stem cell-like state. If we could understand this process fully, the implications for human medicine would be revolutionary. Could we use similar techniques to regenerate damaged organs, to reverse aging in human cells, to cure diseases caused by cellular aging? These are the questions driving current research into Teratopsis. The immortal jellyfish might hold secrets that could transform how we treat aging and disease in humans. But there's something almost melancholy about it too. Teratopsis doesn't remember its previous lives. Each time it transforms back to a polyp and grows into a medusa again, it's essentially a new individual with the same DNA. It has no continuity of consciousness because it has no consciousness at all. It achieves biological immortality, but remains, in every meaningful sense, mindless. It will never know what it has accomplished. It drifts through an endless cycle of death and rebirth, completely unaware that it's doing something impossible. While Teratopsis dorna is barely larger than a grain of rice, at the opposite end of the spectrum exists a creature so enormous that it defies belief. The lion's mane jellyfish, Cyanea capillata, is the longest animal on Earth. Not the heaviest. That title belongs to the blue whale, but the longest. The largest confirmed specimen had a bell diameter of over 2 meters and tentacles that stretched more than 36 meters. There are unconfirmed reports of specimens with tentacles exceeding 50 meters, longer than a blue whale, longer than most buildings are tall. Imagine encountering one of these in the water. The bell, massive and rust-colored, pulsing slowly above you like a giant parachute made of flesh, and hanging below, descending into the darkness, are curtains of tentacles, hundreds of them, thousands of them, creating a forest of stinging threads that fill the water. Each tentacle can stretch and contract, drifting with the current, creating a killing zone that might span dozens of meters. Small fish that wander into this maze of tentacles are stung and paralyzed almost instantly, then drawn up to the mouth and consumed. The lion's mane jellyfish lives in the cold waters of the Arctic, northern Atlantic, and northern Pacific Oceans. It prefers cooler temperatures, and the largest specimens are found in the coldest regions. There's a relationship between temperature and size in jellyfish. Colder water generally allows them to grow larger, though the reasons for this aren't entirely clear. It may have to do with metabolic rates, or with oxygen levels in colder water, or with the abundance of prey in nutrient-rich cold seas. Despite their size, these giants are still built on the same impossibly simple body plan as the smallest jellyfish. There's still no brain, no blood, no bones. The bell is just a massive dome of mesoglea, water-bound into a jelly-like matrix with a thin layer of tissue on either side. The tentacles are hollow tubes extending from the bell, covered in nematocysts. The nerve net that controls the pulsing of the bell is spread out across a body that might weigh hundreds of kilograms, coordinating muscle contractions through a structure that barely qualifies as a nervous system. Encounters with lion's mane jellyfish can be dangerous for humans. While the venom isn't usually fatal, the sheer number of nematocysts on such massive tentacles means that contact can result in thousands of stings at once. The pain can be severe, and in some cases can cause systemic reactions, difficulty breathing, and nausea. There are reports of swimmers and divers becoming entangled in the tentacles and having to be rescued, their skin covered in angry red welts where the nematocysts cysts fired. But the lion's mane isn't the only giant. The Nomura's jellyfish, Nimopilema nomurai, native to the seas between China and Japan, can grow to 2 meters in diameter and weigh up to 200 kilograms. These massive jellies have become a serious problem in recent decades, forming enormous blooms that devastate fishing operations. The jellyfish fill fishing nets, making them so heavy that they tear or capsize boats. Fishermen who try to remove them get stung. The sheer mass of jellyfish flesh can damage the fish in the nets, rendering the catch worthless. In 2009, a Japanese fishing vessel capsized when the crew tried to haul in a net full of Nomura's jellyfish, and 3 men drowned. There's also Stygiomedusa gigantea, a deep-sea species rarely seen by humans. It has a bell over a meter across and 4 enormous oral arms, thick ribbon-like structures that can extend over 10 meters. These arms replace the typical mass of thin tentacles and are thought to trap prey differently, possibly by wrapping around it. Stygiomedusa lives in the deep sea, between 600 and 1700 meters down, drifting through perpetual darkness. We know almost nothing about its life cycle or behavior because it's so rarely encountered. Deep-sea submersibles have filmed it fewer than 200 times in history. These giants remind us that the basic jellyfish body plan, simple as it is extraordinarily scalable. The same design that works for a 4mm Teratopsis works for a 30-meter lion's mane. Few animal body plans are this flexible. Imagine trying to scale a mammal up to that size. The square cube law would make it impossible. As you increase the size, the volume and mass increase faster than the surface area, making it harder to support the weight and harder to move. But jellyfish don't support weight, they're supported by the water. They don't have bones that would need to be thicker and heavier. They're mostly water themselves, neutrally buoyant, essentially weightless in their environment. This allows them to grow to sizes that would be impossible on land or for more conventionally structured animals. In recent decades, something has been happening in the world's oceans. Jellyfish populations are exploding. In bays and coastal waters around the world, massive aggregations called blooms are appearing with increasing frequency and intensity. These blooms can contain millions of individuals, turning the water into a soup of pulsing bodies so dense that you can't see through it. Off the coast of Japan, Nomura's jellyfish blooms have become a regular occurrence, devastating fishing operations. In the Mediterranean, blooms of mauve stinger jellyfish have closed beaches and caused millions of euros in lost tourism revenue. In the Gulf of Mexico, moon jellies form blooms so large they're visible from space. In the Black Sea, the invasive comb jelly, Menemyopsis leedi, a jellyfish relative, multiplied so rapidly that it consumed most of the zooplankton, causing fisheries to collapse. In Namibia, jellyfish now outweigh fish in the local ecosystem by a ratio of 3 to 1. The question is, why? What's causing this global increase in jellyfish populations? The answer is complicated and involves multiple factors, many of them related to human activity. First, overfishing. When we remove large predatory fish from the ocean, we remove the primary predators of jellyfish. Many fish species eat jellyfish, especially when they're young. Tuna, sunfish, sea turtles, and many others consume large quantities of jellies. But we've reduced global fish populations by more than half since the 1970s. With fewer fish to eat them, jellyfish populations can grow unchecked. At the same time, Overfishing removes competition for food. Adult fish and jellyfish often eat the same things, zooplankton and fish larvae. When we remove the fish, there's more food available for the jellyfish. We're essentially removing the competitors and the predators at the same time, creating ideal conditions for jellyfish to thrive. Second, ocean warming. Many jellyfish species reproduce more rapidly in warmer water. The polyps undergo strobilation more frequently, producing more ephirae. The medusae grow faster and reach sexual maturity earlier. Climate change is warming the oceans globally, and this appears to be triggering more frequent and larger jellyfish blooms. Third, pollution and eutrophication. When we dump nutrients into coastal waters from agricultural runoff, sewage, and other sources, it causes algae blooms. These blooms eventually die and decompose, consuming oxygen and creating hypoxic zones, areas of low oxygen where fish cannot survive. But jellyfish can tolerate much lower oxygen levels than fish. They can thrive in conditions that would kill most other marine life. So pollution creates environments where jellyfish have an advantage. Fourth, coastal development. When we build harbors, piers, offshore platforms, and other underwater structures, we create habitat for jellyfish polyps. Polyps need hard surfaces to attach to, and natural hard surfaces in coastal waters are often limited. But every piling, every boat hull, every submerged piece of concrete provides substrate for polyps. We've vastly increased the available habitat for the polyp stage of the jellyfish life cycle, allowing larger populations to establish and persist. Fifth, the jellyfish have a built-in advantage in disturbed ecosystems. Their life cycle allows them to survive harsh conditions that would kill fish. The polyps can wait out bad periods, then produce massive numbers of medusae when conditions improve. They reproduce both sexually and asexually, giving them multiple strategies for population growth. They have few diseases that affect them. They can eat almost anything small enough to catch. They're generalists, adapted to instability, and in a rapidly changing ocean, generalists often win. The consequences of increasing jellyfish blooms are significant. Economically, they damage fisheries both directly by competing with fish and eating fish larvae, and indirectly by clogging nets and interfering with fishing operations. They've caused billions of dollars in damage to power plants by clogging the water intake systems that cool the generators. In 2013, a bloom of jellyfish shut down a nuclear reactor in Sweden. In Israel, jellyfish have repeatedly forced the shutdown of desalination plants. Ecologically, large jellyfish blooms can fundamentally alter marine ecosystems. Jellyfish consume enormous quantities of zooplankton and fish eggs, suppressing fish recruitment. In some areas, the ecosystem appears to have flipped from a fish-dominated state to a jellyfish-dominated state, and it's not clear if this can be reversed. Once jellyfish become the dominant predators in an area, they may prevent fish populations from recovering by eating the larvae before they can grow large enough to survive. There's a term for this, the jellification of the oceans. It describes a scenario where overfishing, pollution, and climate change combine to create conditions that favor jellyfish over fish, leading to a fundamental restructuring of marine ecosystems. In this scenario, the oceans of the future might look more like the oceans of the deep past, before the Cambrian explosion, when simple, gelatinous organisms dominated the seas. This isn't inevitable. Fish populations can recover if we reduce fishing pressure. Pollution can be controlled, but it requires action, and it requires understanding that jellyfish blooms aren't just a strange phenomenon. They're a symptom of larger problems with how we're treating the oceans. There's a paradox at the heart of jellyfish biology. They're among the simplest animals that exist, barely more complex than a sponge, and yet they're incredibly successful. They've survived multiple mass extinctions. They've remained largely unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, while other lineages evolved and diversified and sometimes went extinct. They dominate environments that more complex animals cannot survive. How can something so simple be so successful? Part of the answer is that simplicity itself is an advantage. With fewer parts, there's less that can go wrong. A jellyfish doesn't need to maintain a complex nervous system, a cardiovascular system, a respiratory system, or any of the other systems that make complex animals vulnerable. It doesn't need to regulate its body temperature. It doesn't need to actively maintain salt balance because its internal environment is essentially the same as the external ocean. It doesn't need to spend energy growing and maintaining bones or a protective shell. The energy requirements of a jellyfish are remarkably low, which means it can survive in environments where there isn't enough food to support more complex animals. This minimalism makes jellyfish extraordinarily resilient. They can survive in water that's too warm, too cold, too acidic, too polluted, or too oxygen-poor for most other marine animals. They can tolerate massive variations in salinity, which is why some species can live in estuaries where rivers meet the sea, environments where salinity changes dramatically with the tides. They can survive being torn into pieces and regenerate. They can shrink themselves when food is scarce, reducing their body size to match the available resources, then grow again when conditions improve. Another advantage is their flexibility. The two-stage life cycle, with the sessile polyp and the drifting medusa, allows them to exploit different ecological niches and survive different environmental conditions. The polyps can wait out periods of harsh conditions or low food availability, preserving the genetic line, while the medusae can rapidly exploit opportunities when conditions are good. This bet hedging strategy, having multiple forms with different survival strategies, is powerful in unpredictable environments. Their reproductive strategy is also remarkably effective. A single jellyfish can produce thousands or even millions of eggs. Most of those eggs will never survive to adulthood, but the sheer numbers mean that some will. And because jellyfish can also reproduce asexually, through the polyps budding off copies of themselves, they can rapidly increase their numbers without needing to find mates. This combination of sexual and asexual reproduction gives them multiple paths to population growth. There's also the fact that very few things eat adult jellyfish. The body is mostly water, nutritionally poor, and difficult to digest. The nematocysts remain active even after the jellyfish is dead, making it dangerous to consume. Some specialized predators have evolved to eat jellies. Sea turtles have tough mouths and esophagi that protect them from stings. Sunfish can consume massive quantities. Certain sea slugs actually steal the nematocysts and use them for their own defense. But these predators are relatively few. For most marine animals, jellyfish are not worth the effort. Yet there's a cost to this simplicity. Jellyfish can't actively hunt. They can't chase down prey or search for it. They're at the mercy of the currents, drifting wherever the water takes them. They can move vertically, swimming up or down in the water column, and some species can swim horizontally to a limited degree, but they're fundamentally passive. They encounter food by chance, or because their tentacles are long enough and numerous enough that they act like a drift net, filtering prey from the water. This means they're most successful in environments where food is abundant and drifts past them regularly. They also can't learn or adapt their behavior. Every jellyfish of a given species behaves essentially the same way because the behavior is hardwired into the simple nerve net. There's no memory, no experience, No individual variation in personality or hunting strategy. They're biological automatons running the same program over and over. This works well in stable environments, but it means they can't adjust to rapid changes in ways that animals with actual brains can. And despite their resilience, jellyfish are still vulnerable to predation, especially when young. The Ephiri, the newly released baby jellyfish, are tiny and vulnerable. Many are eaten by fish, crustaceans, and other predators before they can grow large enough to defend themselves. The polyps can be grazed on by sea slugs and other small invertebrates. Even the adults, despite their stings, can be consumed by specialized predators. But on balance, the advantages of simplicity seem to outweigh the disadvantages. In a changing ocean, where conditions are becoming more unstable, where food webs are disrupted, where temperatures and chemistry are shifting, the jellyfish, with their low requirements and high tolerance for disturbance, are positioned to succeed. They don't need the ocean to be healthy. They just need the ocean to be wet. To understand how successful jellyfish truly are, you need to understand how long they've been around. Jellyfish are ancient beyond ancient. They existed before the Cambrian explosion, that pivotal moment roughly 540 million years ago, when most major animal groups first appeared in the fossil record. Jellyfish were already there, drifting in pre-Cambrian seas, and they looked remarkably similar to the jellyfish we see today. We know this because of exceptional fossil sites where the conditions were just right to preserve soft-bodied organisms. Soft tissue normally doesn't fossilize. Without bones or shells, most organisms decay completely, leaving no trace. But in rare circumstances, in fine-grained sediments deposited quickly in low-oxygen environments, even soft tissue can be preserved. And in these rare windows into the deep past, we find jellyfish. The Burgess Shale in Canada, about 508 million years old, contains beautifully preserved fossils of strange Cambrian creatures. Among them are clear jellyfish fossils, including some that belong to groups still alive today. The Chengjiang biota in China, even older at about 518 million years, also contains jellyfish. And recently, fossils from the Ediacaran period, between 650 and 540 million years ago, have been reinterpreted as possible jellyfish or jellyfish relatives. These creatures were drifting through the oceans before there were fish, before there were trilobites, possibly before there were predators of any kind. This deep antiquity is remarkable. Jellyfish have survived every mass extinction event in Earth's history. They survived the Ordovician extinction, the Devonian extinction, the Permian extinction that killed 90% of all marine species, the Triassic extinction, and the Cretaceous extinction that killed the dinosaurs. They drifted through ice ages and hothouse climates, through periods when the oceans were oxygen-rich and periods when they were anoxic dead zones. They survived the evolution of fish, which should have been a major threat, and they're surviving the current biodiversity crisis caused by humans. How do they do it? Part of the answer is that jellyfish fill a particular ecological niche that's remarkably stable across different environmental conditions. They're planktonic predators, eating zooplankton, fish eggs, and larvae. This food source has been available continuously for hundreds of millions of years because plankton is the base of the marine food web. As long as there's photosynthesis in the ocean, there will be phytoplankton. As long as there's phytoplankton, there will be zooplankton eating it. And as long as there's zooplankton, there's food for jellyfish. Another factor is their low metabolic requirements. During mass extinctions, when food becomes scarce and environmental conditions deteriorate, animals with high metabolic needs are the first to go. They require too much energy to survive. But jellyfish can survive on very little. They can shrink themselves reducing their metabolic needs even further. They can wait out bad conditions as polyps, which are even more resilient than the medusae. This ability to persist in harsh conditions has allowed them to survive periods that killed most other animals. There's also the fact that jellyfish are generalists. They don't specialize on one type of prey or one type of habitat. They eat whatever small organisms they can catch, and they can live in almost any marine environment, from the tropics to the poles, from the surface to the deep sea. This flexibility means that when environmental conditions change, jellyfish can adapt simply by drifting to wherever conditions are suitable. They don't need to evolve new traits. They just need to be wherever the water currents take them. And perhaps most importantly, the basic jellyfish body plan is so simple that it doesn't need to change. Evolution favors organisms that are well adapted to their environment, but it also tends to add complexity over time as lineages adapt to more specialized niches. Jellyfish have largely resisted this trend. They remain simple because simplicity works. There's no evolutionary pressure to develop a brain when a nerve net is sufficient. There's no pressure to develop bones when the water supports your weight. There's no pressure to develop a heart when diffusion can move nutrients through your small, thin body. This evolutionary conservatism means that jellyfish haven't accumulated the kind of specialized adaptations that make organisms vulnerable when environments change. They're not locked into a particular lifestyle or food source. They haven't painted themselves into an evolutionary corner. They remain flexible, generalized, simple, and that simplicity has been the key to their longevity. Looking at the fossil record, it's striking how little jellyfish have changed. A paleontologist looking at a 500-million-year-old jellyfish fossil would recognize it immediately as a jellyfish. The same basic body plan, the same radial symmetry, the same bell and tentacle structure. Compare this to almost any other animal group. Fish have evolved into thousands of forms, from sharks to seahorses to eels. Mammals have evolved from tiny shrew-like creatures into whales, bats, elephants, and humans. Even insects, which have a relatively conservative body plan, show enormous diversity. But jellyfish remain jellyfish. There's something humbling about this. We humans think of ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, the most successful organisms. We have big brains, complex societies, technology. We've spread to every continent, and we're planning to spread to other planets. We think we're winning. But by the measure of evolutionary success, by the measure of longevity and resilience and the ability to survive catastrophic changes, jellyfish are far more successful than we are. They've been here for over 500 million years. Our species has been around for perhaps 300,000 years, and it's not yet clear we'll make it another 1,000. Jellyfish will almost certainly outlive us. When we're gone, when whatever we do to the planet has run its course, the jellyfish will still be here, drifting through the changed oceans, eating whatever plankton remains, reproducing, surviving. They survived the worst the planet could throw at them over 500 million years. They'll survive us too. So what does the future hold? If current trends continue, if fish populations keep declining, if oceans keep warming and acidifying, if we keep polluting coastal waters and building structures that provide habitat for polyps, what will the oceans look like in 50 years, in 100 years? Some scientists paint a grim picture. They describe a future ocean dominated not by fish, but by jellyfish, an ocean that has reverted to something like the Precambrian, before complex food webs evolved. In this future, the oceans are less productive, less diverse, less capable of supporting human life. Fisheries have collapsed because there are no fish, just jellyfish, and you can't feed humanity on jellyfish. The ecological services that healthy oceans provide, carbon sequestration, oxygen production, nutrient cycling are diminished. The ocean becomes a simpler, more primitive place. This scenario is called the jellyfish stable state, and the worry is that once an ecosystem flips into this state, it might not flip back. Jellyfish eat fish eggs and larvae, preventing fish populations from recovering. The lack of fish means more food for jellyfish, allowing their populations to remain high. It's a feedback loop, a self-reinforcing cycle, where jellyfish create conditions that favor more jellyfish. We're already seeing hints of this in some places. In the Black Sea, after the comb jelly Mnemoniopsis exploded in population in the 1980s, fish stocks collapsed and have never fully recovered, even decades later. In the Namibian Benguela ecosystem, jellyfish now consume twice as much food as all the fish combined. The system has fundamentally changed, and it's not clear if it can change back. But this future is not inevitable. Fish populations can recover remarkably quickly if we stop overfishing. There are examples of this happening. When fisheries are properly managed, when we protect breeding grounds and limit catch to sustainable levels, fish come back. And when fish come back, they eat jellyfish, they compete with jellyfish, and the balance shifts back toward a fish-dominated ecosystem. Reducing pollution would help too. Cleaner water means fewer hypoxic zones, fewer areas where jellyfish have an advantage over fish. Better management of coastal development, removing unnecessary structures that provide polyp habitat, could reduce the reservoir of polyps ready to produce medusae when conditions are right. Climate change is the hardest factor to address, but even there, progress is possible. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to renewable energy, protecting and restoring coastal ecosystems that absorb carbon, like mangrove forests and seagrass beds. All of these actions would help stabilize ocean temperatures and chemistry. And more stable oceans are oceans where fish can compete more effectively with jellyfish. There's also the possibility that ecosystems will reach a new equilibrium. That includes both fish and jellyfish in different proportions than we're used to. Maybe the future ocean isn't entirely dominated by jellyfish, but it has more jellyfish than the past ocean did. Maybe we need to adjust our expectations and our relationship with the ocean to account for this new reality. Some researchers are even looking at whether jellyfish could be a resource rather than a problem. In several Asian countries, certain species of jellyfish are harvested and eaten, processed and dried and turned into a crunchy delicacy. Could we develop markets for jellyfish products that would both control blooms and provide economic value? Could we use jellyfish in fertilizer or process them for collagen, or find other industrial uses for the massive amounts of jellyfish biomass that currently just goes to waste? There's also the scientific value. Jellyfish have already given us one of the most important tools in modern biology: green fluorescent protein, or GFP. This protein, first isolated from the crystal jellyfish Aquaria victoria, glows green when exposed to blue light. Scientists realized they could attach the gene for GFP to other genes, creating a visual marker that allows them to see when and where those genes are expressed. GFP has been used in thousands of experiments and has contributed to countless discoveries about how cells work, how diseases develop, how organisms grow. The scientists who developed GFP as a research tool won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2008. What other secrets do jellyfish hold? We've barely begun to understand the mechanisms behind the immortal jellyfish's ability to reverse aging. We don't fully understand how jellyfish venom works at the molecular level, and some components might have medical applications. We don't know much about deep-sea jellyfish species or what role they play in deep ocean ecosystems. There are certainly species we haven't discovered yet. The future ocean will be shaped by the choices we make now. We can continue on the current path and risk creating an ocean of jellyfish, an ocean that's simpler, less productive, less able to support human civilization. Or we can change course, reduce our impact, give fish populations a chance to recover, and maintain oceans that are diverse and productive. But either way, the jellyfish will be there. They've survived worse than anything we can do. They're the ultimate survivors, the ancient drifters, the brainless killers that have outlasted almost everything else that has ever lived. They remind us that success in evolution doesn't require intelligence or complexity. It just requires the ability to survive, to reproduce, and to keep going no matter what the world throws at you. There's something profound about an animal that has no brain and yet survives. We humans put so much value on intelligence, on consciousness, on the ability to think and plan and understand. We assume that these qualities are necessary for success, that they're what makes us special. But then you look at a jellyfish, this mindless blob of water and tissue, and you realize that it's been succeeding for 500 million years without any of the things we consider essential. The jellyfish doesn't know it exists. It cannot contemplate its own existence or wonder about its place in the universe. It has no hopes, no fears, no desires beyond the automatic impulses coded into its simple nerve net. It cannot learn from experience because it has no memory. It cannot plan for the future because it has no concept of time. Every moment is new, disconnected from the moment before. And yet it lives, it hunts, it feeds, it reproduces. It responds to its environment in ways that keep it alive. It has survived mass extinctions, ice ages, the evolution of countless predators, and now the activities of the most destructive species the planet has ever known, all without a thought, all without any understanding of what it's doing or why. There's a kind of perfection in this. The jellyfish is purely functional, every part of it serving a purpose, nothing wasted on unnecessary complexity. Its life reduced to its essence: grow, eat, reproduce, survive. No anxiety about the future, no regret about the past, no existential dread, no questions about meaning or purpose. Just existence, pure and simple. We look at jellyfish and we see simple creatures, primitive organisms that never evolved the complexity we value. But maybe we have it backwards. Maybe the jellyfish represents not a failure to evolve, but a perfection of form. Maybe they found a body plan and a lifestyle that works so well, that's so fundamentally suited to the environment they inhabit, that there was no need to change. Maybe simplicity is sophistication. When you watch a jellyfish pulse through the water, translucent and ethereal, trailing its tentacles like ghostly ribbons, there's a strange beauty to it. It's alien and familiar at the same time. It moves with a rhythm that seems almost hypnotic, the bell contracting and relaxing, a heartbeat without a heart. It glows sometimes, bioluminescent proteins creating cold light in the darkness. It drifts wherever the current takes it, not fighting the ocean, but becoming part of it. These creatures have been here since before life got complicated. They were in the oceans when the first fish evolved. They were here when animals first crawled onto land. They were here when the dinosaurs ruled the earth, and when the dinosaurs died. They were here when the first humans looked out at the ocean and wondered what lived beneath the waves. And they'll be here long after we're gone, drifting through whatever ocean remains, hunting plankton in waters we would not recognize, thriving or merely surviving, but continuing. There's a lesson in that, if we're willing to learn it. Success doesn't require complexity. Survival doesn't require consciousness. Life finds a way, and sometimes that way is to stay simple, to remain flexible, to avoid the trap of over-specialization. The jellyfish stripped away everything unnecessary and kept only what works. They are form following function. Evolution reduced to its most elegant statement. We humans are the opposite. We're complex, almost to the point of dysfunction, carrying evolutionary baggage from our past, bodies and minds that evolved for a different world than the one we've created. We think too much, worry too much, want too much. We've conquered the planet, but we're not sure we can survive what we've done to it. Meanwhile, the jellyfish just drift and pulse and sting and eat, and they've been doing it successfully for 500 million years. Maybe there's wisdom in the mindlessness. Maybe there's something to learn from an animal that doesn't try to control its environment, but simply exists within it, taking what it needs, adapted so perfectly to its world that it hasn't needed to change. We look at jellyfish and see simple creatures. They look at nothing because they have no eyes, no brain, no capacity for perception as we understand it. But they're still here, and that counts for something. The ocean is full of these ancient drifters, has been for longer than almost any other animal has existed. They pulse through the darkness and the light, through warm water and cold, through the changing chemistry and temperature of seas that have witnessed every era of Earth's history. They are witnesses without memory, survivors without strategy, killers without malice. They are life in its most basic form. Stripped of everything we think makes life meaningful and yet undeniably, persistently, successfully alive. They will outlast us when our cities are dust and our civilizations are forgotten. When the oceans have risen or fallen or changed in ways we cannot predict, the jellyfish will still be there, drifting, pulsing, stinging, surviving. The eternal witnesses to everything the ocean has been and will be. The brainless masters of the deep, the immortal, ancient, impossible jellyfish.